All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome back to another Form Check Friday, where we take your videos, we put them up on this screen behind me, and I critique them, right? You know what it is. All right, let's get into it here. So we left off last week with an interesting question about Eric's squat. Now, with Eric's squat, he says he's been lifting 4 years. Dude's jacked, by the way. Just going to point that out one more time. You're looking good, buddy. All right. So he's been lifting for 4 years. He spent the last 6 months focused on powerlifting style stuff and squatting for 1.5 of those 4 years. Now, what he's seeing, what he noticed in the email or mentioned in the email is his feet. It looks like the arches of his feet are kind of collapsing as he gets into the bottom position of the squat. And you can see he kind of rocks forward a little bit on some of these reps too. So he says it doesn't seem to affect him, but he's worried that this could be an issue later, right? So what I asked of the audience last time was to leave some comments about whether or not, number one, they felt this was an issue worth tackling. Like, let's say this, fixing this issue causes us to have to take weight off the bar for Eric. Is that worth it? And if so, how would you fix it, right? What are the cues? What are the implements or exercises? Those kinds of things that you would use. So I'm going to go ahead and weigh in my damn self now. So number one, I think this is a super easy fix. I think this is as simple as potentially some stance modifications. We might be better suited squatting a little bit more narrow, because we can see as we get into the bottom of the squat, we are seeing a little bit of that knee cave, which to me just tells me that, okay, like, if we're falling into this position, and this here is where the hips want to put the knees in the strongest position to drive through that sticking point, why don't we just move the feet under where the knees want to go? Boom, right? Bring that stance a little bit narrower. I think that's going to solve some of it, right? And if the knees aren't coming in, probably not shifting onto the insides of the feet. Now, I do want to preface this all by saying that Eric could probably just continue to squat like this for a long time and get really strong and have no issues, right? I think we're part of a culture, especially online and even maybe through form checking, of like creating this sort of technical neuroses of people just being so obsessed with technique that they won't put any freaking weight on the bar. And I think that's wrong. Right? I think that some people have unconventional techniques. I think that's fine. I don't think there's anything inherently injury inducing about having a technique that's not aesthetic. So let me just clear that up. But I do think these are some easy fixes. The other thing I would do is just cue you to be conscious of your feet, man. Just like push onto the outsides of your feet a little bit. Keep your heel in contact as you're hitting the bottom. And the last thing I would do is maybe implement a heeled shoe. Because I feel like the Chuck Taylors especially are like not the greatest lifting shoes. If you've been watching the channel for a long time, you probably have heard me advocate for these shoes. But the more I've seen newer lifters getting into them, maybe they're just not built like they were back in my day. But I'm not a huge fan of them, honestly. I would say if you want a flat shoe, go with something like a water shoe, almost like the Notorious Lift slippers. I've heard are really good. And there's a number of other ones. I think A7's making some. The Goodlift Deadlift and Deadlift Pro, Sabo Deadlift and Deadlift Pro are good shoes for flat shoed squatters and deadlifters, obviously. And if you want to get into a heeled shoe, I would maybe do that, because that's going to give you a really stable base where, even if your foot rolls a little bit, the shoe's not going to give and let it fall that far in. If your foot rolls a little bit, that solid, stable base is going to stay in that same position. So even if you do get a little bit of rolling into the inside, we're not going to see this huge movement as the shoe squishes and distorts and allows you to kind of fall into that position. So that's my 2 cents there. In terms of the rest of your squat, dude, looks really good. I think we're overarching on the way up. And I think part of that is probably just because you're looking at yourself in the mirror, right? So I think on the way up, you're looking up at yourself in the mirror and you're really trying to like arch your back and drive your chest up. And I would say just keep those ribs down on top of your abs. I know it's probably going to make your abs look not as good as they are right now. But that like ribs down bracing and being a little bit more patient with the trunk angle, I think is going to be a really helpful thing in the long term. So, all right, man. Good luck with all of that. Let's get into Mario's squat. All right. Now, before I dive into this, if you're interested in getting your form looked at, go ahead and head to the description box below. We made a full video on how to submit, submission guidelines, where to send it, all that stuff. Description box below, formcheckfriday@gmail.com. Number 2, make sure to check out the Calgary Barbell training app. We have a feature-rich training log. You can upload all your videos. It's going to give you suggested loads. It has a learning RPE table that's going to adapt to what you log in it. And it also has 10 currently Calgary Barbell programs built by myself in there, as well as access to our exclusive Discord community where myself and the other coaches are in there doing form checks. We're answering questions about programming. We're basically coaching everybody in there to some extent, right? It's not as hands-on as our coaching options, which you can find on calgarybarbell.com to access myself and our team of fantastic coaches at Calgary Barbell. But anyways, that's enough shameless self-promotion. Let's get back to it. All right, Mario. So let's take a look, my dude. He's 25 years old, powerlifting for 3 years. He's 74 kilos, or at least competes in the 74 kilo class. And this is 175 for a triple. So first off, I don't think we're squatting to depth. I think we're squatting a little high here, man. So that's my first critique. Generally, when we're looking at technique, there are sort of 2 big things we need to look at. Number 1 is the lift fitting the sort of definition of the lift laid out by the rules of competition. If we're going to compete, we need to pass those. We need those all to be check marks, or we're not going to get the lift passed. We're going to either bomb out or miss lifts on technicalities. So that's number 1. And that is like, are we squatting to depth? Can we pause our benches? Is our butt staying on the ground? Are we locking out our deadlifts properly, etc.? So missing depth, cardinal sin, not to be shamed for, but definitely something to pay attention to, right? If you're using weights that don't allow you to hit depth, we're squatting too heavy, my dude. The other thing here is actually I would recommend a similar change to what I was just recommending to Eric in that last video. And what I would say the recommendation is just bring that stance a little bit narrower, because again, we're seeing a lot of this knee cave, right? So for your strongest position, it seems like your hips want to move your knees a little closer together. And with this wider stance, your knees are starting out here and then swinging in. So to me, perhaps squatting narrower will allow you to sort of fulfill those natural positions that your morphology, your anatomy wants to put you in for a strong position. And, that could be the trick. Now let's take a look at the upper back. There might be some stuff going on with the shelf too. No, your upper back looks good, but again, some of these things might change once we get another inch or 2 of depth. So be mindful of that. Let's unload the bar a little bit. Let's squat to depth. And I think a bit of a narrower stance would help a fair bit with even just hip comfort, right? A lot of the times when people can't squat to depth or have difficulty getting to depth, stance changes are a big thing. Stance changes can really make it more comfortable for a lifter to get to depth. So I wouldn't count that out. I think that could be a really good, really big thing for you there, Mario. All right, up next we have Jay doing some bench press. Look at this. Put it right on the screen for us. So, Jay started a novice lifting program about 2 weeks ago. He says bench historically has been his weakest lift. All right, we're going to stop right there. I saw some stuff with the on-rack already. And this is a triple at RPE 8. Okay, so number 1. So that we're pretty shaky on the unrack, right? I think that we need to get more tightness here. We need to get more of a tight setup with the upper back in terms of pulling the shoulder blades together, pulling the shoulder blades down, and contributing to all of that with the legs, right? So the big thing that we're doing with the legs and the bench press, what this mysterious leg drive is that everybody talks about, is we're basically using the knees and the feet to drive backwards along the bench. And the tension and friction of your shoulder blade being in contact with the bench is going to pull the shoulder blade down this way, right? So you're going to push the majority of your body up this way. You're going to keep this tension and friction really close and tight to the bench so that when your body pushes back this way, we end up with more of an arch, right? So that's number 1. Number 2, when we unrack, and unfortunately with these racks, it can be a little bit tricky at the best of times, but it looks like you had plenty of room after the unrack where you kind of went up and over. Up and over like this, right? Generally the unrack we want to be right like up a little bit, as little as possible, and then straight out, right? That's the kind of path we want to see on the unrack. We don't want to see this kind of path on the unrack, because if we see that, that means that our shoulders are likely doing the same thing. If we have to reach the shoulder out of position, we've just undone all of that setup. We've undone all of that positioning. So when we unrack the bench, we want it to be elbows. We want to be unrack with the triceps, pull it into position, right? We don't want to be unrack with the shoulders, desperately try to regain position with the weight of the bar bearing down on us, right? Very, very different things there. So let's take a look at the bench now itself. You can see how much Jay here is wobbling from side to side, right? Because he's undone that nice stable base of the shoulder blades being flat on the bench, and now he's wobbling around on his back, right? So the other thing, we totally drop the bar, right? You start coming down, it looks pretty good, and then just before the chest, you loosen, your shoulders actually visibly come forward at the bottom. So again, we have to reach the chest up and keep those shoulders back. And then when we're rating RPE, we have to think about how many more reps could we move through the hardest part of the range of motion. This is a big thing, and I see this all the time, especially with a sumo deadlift. That's I think a big culprit of it, right? Is because a lot of lifters, once they break the floor, it just goes, right? So they'll rate it a 7, when in actuality, they could probably only break the floor with one more, right? So when we're thinking about RPE, for you, Jay, it's the same thing. How many more reps could you push through this part of the range of motion? That first one looked like it was probably an RPE 8. Again, drop the bar on the chest, really hard time getting it going. So we need to maintain more tension in the bottom of the range of motion. I want you to control that touch. I want you to keep tension in the upper back, keep the weight of the bar in your hands, don't rest it on your chest, and probably lighten the load a little bit. Right? Like that. There's no way that's an RPE 8. And I'm not trying to be rude, man. It's just not. This last rep is a max. Right? That is pretty much a max attempt. RPE 8 means you could have had 2 more reps there. I'm not sure that's the case. And that's okay. It is. It's okay to overshoot. It's okay to mess up your RPEs sometimes. It's all part of the learning curve, right? This is all part of learning how to lift. That shit is okay. But I'm just calling it like it is. I'm going to tell you like it is because I want you to get better. I want you to get smarter about lifting, and I want you to be successful. So let's be honest with our RPEs. How many more reps can we put through the toughest part of the range of motion? Because that is inevitably a part of the range of motion. All right. Up next is Scott. So Scott is struggling with his deadlift. He says he's not maintaining enough velocity through to the sort of end of the lift. He says it happens mostly on limit lifts or PR attempts. So this video is 225 for 3 kilos. And he says he struggles for the lockout on the last rep. He says he tried implementing block pulls, but they didn't help because he doesn't have that same struggle on block pulls. So the big reason that we're struggling with lockout is because this position off the floor we've got a lot of flexion in the low back. Now, flexion in the low back, a lot of people will demonize because like, oh, bro, you're going to snap city, bro. You're gonna snap your shit up. It's gonna hurt you. Now, flexion is not necessarily a mechanic for injury. Now, I'm not saying you're never going to hurt yourself with a flex back, but I'm just saying flexing inherently is not a dangerous thing. However, when we look at the way that lifters are built and the way that the body moves, it can be a pretty inefficient position for a lot of people. So what I'm seeing here is we are not pulling the slack out of the bar at all. You're starting from a rounded position, you're jerking your body into the bar violently, and then you're just kind of like hoping that you can get through the rest of the lift. So number one, we need to work on that positioning. We need to figure out how to pull the slack out of the bar before we initiate the lift, and we need to figure out how to get a little bit more extension in that back. Now, I'm not saying you won't be a round back deadlifter. Plenty of examples of very strong, very, very injury-free round back deadlifters, but you'll notice a trend with most of the round back deadlifters is they give up position in their upper back. They allow the shoulders to hang forward a little bit. For the most part, if you look at the bottom of their ribs to their pelvis, it's more or less in a sort of neutral range position. And that's because when you get to the top here, what's happening is your hips have pretty much extended as much as they can. Your upper back's extended as much as they can. And the flexion is in your erectors along the smallest part of your lumbar spine. And those erectors are just not that big. They're not that strong. Whereas if you can maintain that extension and finish your lockouts with those big old muscles known as the booty, your glutes, then you're going to have a way better time locking these lifts out. The reason you didn't have the same struggle with block pulls is because you probably started the block pulls in a way better position. You probably didn't have to flex your back like that to get down to the bar for block pulls. So what I would say is, number one, try sumo, because, you know, many times with conventional lifters who don't really know how to straighten their low back, you get them to do some sumo, you get their quads out of the way, and they're like, oh, this is what it feels like to, you know, have a more neutral range low back and push the bar off the floor and a lot of this kind of stuff. Now, I'm not saying that you need to convert to sumo, but doing some sumo can really help sort of illuminate some of those kinesthetic, some of that kinesthetic awareness. So basically understanding how your body feels in certain positions in space, right? It can be useful. That's all I'm saying. Definitely need to figure out this positioning though. So I think number one, probably widening the grip, probably widening the stance. It looks like the quads are running into the torso a little bit, which can be problematic in terms of trying to get that low back extended. And yeah, just take some weight off the bar, try to figure it out. Like I'm very confident that if you can get into a good position with like 120 or 200 on the bar, you can definitely work your way back up to here and surpass these plateaus for sure. Because if you can pull 250 like this, you can probably pull 275 with a little bit better technique and a year under your belt of using it, right? A lot of the time, these like technique changes are not going to make you like stronger like that, right? Chances are, Scott, you're going to have to pull your deadlift back. It's maybe going to feel like shit for a little while and feel weird, and you're going to struggle, and it's going to be annoying as hell, and you're going to be like, well, I had that stupid guy on the internet tell me I had to flatten my back, blah, blah, blah. But in the long run, that's probably the way that we get around this and continue to gain strength. No sexy answers here. All right, up next is Will doing some squats. All right, Will. So Will is from Winnipeg. So shout outs to Manitoba. What's going on, Will? So he says he's been lifting about 6 months. Squat, he says, is his least favorite lift. It feels really inconsistent, he says. He struggles with depth consistency. So his biggest questions are, is depth okay? He says he tried a wider stance and it feels like crap. And he called this set 280 pounds, it looks like, for 5, and he called it at a 9 RPE. So I'm actually a pretty big fan of this lift, Will. I think your squat looks pretty damn good, honestly. I think your depth is good. From this, so this back angle is going to make everything look high, right? This like sort of rear oblique, like rear side angle, it's going to make everything look high. If you can, film straight from the side. And what we're looking for is for the crease of the hip to go below the top of the knee. It looks like most of these reps on this set from this angle even probably fulfill that. Probably our depth. So that's good. It looks like this is one thing I try to convince lifters to do. See how Will gets to this like bottom position? And then he kind of like feels it out. He kind of pulls himself a little bit deeper. He doesn't drop. He doesn't bounce. He doesn't loosen and just fall into the position. He's like, okay, I'm here. And he like stretches or pulls himself in a little deeper. This is something I try to convince lifters to do a lot. And then he has good positioning and good bracing and good tightness out of the hole. The only thing I'm seeing is maybe a bit of a limitation here is this shelf and upper back position. So I'm not sure if maybe thumbs over grip would work a little bit better. Maybe going a little bit narrower would work a little bit better, or even, narrower, or, sorry, what I was trying to say the first time was going a little bit wider could help, or maybe even going a little bit narrower. There we go, finally spit it out. But the big thing is that at the start, we're kind of like shrugged forward like this. As we go through the lift, that actually looks better, and we kind of fall in line and get the upper back brace pretty well, and I think build the shelf quite well. But what I would like to see is more of this kind of position at the top on the unrack and the walkout. Because if we're really far forward on the walkout, it's going to feel heavy and crappy and super shitty. And that could be one of the reasons your squat feels inconsistent. If you're unracking it and walking it out and you're not braced very tight, that can really throw you off. I'm sure everybody watching has had those reps where they pick up the bar and it feels like nothing on their back and they just demolish that set. Or conversely, the set where you pick up that bar, it feels like absolute garbage and it doesn't go so well. Dylan, one of the lights went out. The green screen is very green. So I think if you can get that upper back position sorted out, I think that's going to make you feel more locked in more of the time. We also saw in this rep, we can see as you come out of the hole, that bar throws you forward just a little bit, likely because we're looking so far down. We're a little bit shrugged up and forward with the shoulders. So if we can open this up, pull those shoulder blades back and down, try to build some tension in the lats and tighten that shelf up, you got a good squat here, man. There's no reason you need to go wider. Just doesn't need to happen. I think if you can get to depth, you're even reasonably comfortable, and we're not seeing like a wicked bunch of knee movement, then you're probably totally fine to squat where you want to squat. Like wider is good for some people, but it's not good for everybody. Not everybody, like wider is not always the best thing. So, all right. This last one comes from Go. And he says you get 2 videos attached. So one is a failed attempt at 100 kilos. So we'll put that one up first. So this is gonna be a failed attempt. All right. So he fails his lift at 100 kilos, and then successfully gets the lift, gets the rep 10 minutes later. So he's wondering why he failed the first attempt. Was it a bad misgroove, or what happened there? And I'll play the other one in a sec here. So this first one comes down, touches, and just dies right off the chest, right? Touch, and just dies. The second lift, so he said this was about 10 minutes later, and this one he gets. Comes down, touches, yeah, pretty smooth. Yeah, not even that much of a sticking point. So, my question is, what happened? For everyone still watching, I want you to head into the comments below. You can scrub back and forth, watch those lifts a few times. Let me know what you think happened. What was the difference? What was the difference maker here? Why was it that Go was able to get this weight 10 minutes later after failing it? What did he do wrong in the first one? What did he do right in the second? And, you know, was there more to it than that? I think there might have been. I want everybody to leave their thoughts in the comments below. I will analyze this and tackle this little question, this little powerlifting mystery, if you will, next week at the start of our episode. So make sure and hit that subscribe button, and we will see you all next week. Bye-bye.